Welcome to Excel Magic Trick number 604. Hey, if you want to download this workbook and follow along, click on my YouTube channel, then click on my college website link, and you can download the workbook Excel Magic Trick 604 to 607. Hey, in this trick here, we want to do two things. We want to build a little income statement, and we want to learn how to do mixed cell references. Now, in all the years and classes that I've taught Excel, the number one hardest thing for people to learn is mixed cell references. So although we're going to do a little housekeeping to make income statement, really the bulk of this is going to be learning mixed cell references. All right, so here we go. Sales. We have cost of goods sold, operating and administrative, other expenses, total expenses, net income. Now down here we have an assumption area. Now that's very important because this is a budget, a little income statement budget. And we want to put some percentages down here, build our formulas based on that. So when we change these formula inputs, all the formulas update. Now, why do we use mixed cell references and formula inputs? Because A, it makes creating the template in the first place, you can do it more quickly. And B, yes, like we said before, when you change the inputs, everything updates. All right, now let's highlight everything here. I'm just going to click in a single cell. Notice that there's data everywhere. If I use the keyboard shortcut Control A, it highlights the whole table. Because there was a blank between this table and that table, it didn't highlight this. And then I'm going to go up to Home and say All Borders. Now my sales data, I'm going to put in, we've estimated 1,000 here, 1,500. I'm hitting the Tab key to move to the side. Now these numbers are just typed in. We could easily build those assumptions down here, but for the point of this video, we really want to concentrate on these formulas right here. Now for the time being, all I want to do is put what's called dummy data here. We'll build the rest of our formulas, and then we'll come back and change these to formulas. Dummy data means, hey, just put a single number in for each one of these cells. I've highlighted the cells, and that's called the active cell. The rest of them are blue. The active cell is light color. In the active cell, you type 1 and then hold Control and Enter. Control Enter populates all of the cells with whatever it is you typed into the active cell. Now let's come down here and create our formula for total. I'm going to use the keyboard shortcut Alt equals. Now you got to be careful when you're doing Alt equals. It guesses wrong a lot of the time. And here I can clearly see it's wrong, so I'm simply going to take my cursor and highlight to redirect it. I'm going to click Escape. Another way to do that, Alt equal, is to point to the edge. And when you see your diagonally pointing arrow, you can click and drag it. I'm going to Control Enter because I want to put this formula in this cell and immediately do something to it. I point to this little fill handle in the corner, and when I push my cursor right on top of it, I can see that crosshair. Bill Gates called it a crosshair. I like to call it an angry rabbit. And I'm going to click and drag. When you see your gray box, you drop. Another way to do the total, since I want totals all here, always each one of these formulas is adding 1, 2, 3, 4 cells to my left relatively. I'm going to highlight, and in the active cell, I'm going to go Alt equals. Immediately, it looks like it calculated right, but I'm immediately going to hit the F2 key just to check. And sure enough, it looks like it got it right. If I want to double check it, I come down to the bottom and hit the F2 key. Sure enough, there it is. It's adding up 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 cells to my left. Those are called relative cell references. Relative to me, the formula, where am I going to always look? Where am I always going to look? To the left, 4 cells. Where am I going to look? To the left, 4 cells. Relative cell references. Now let's do a net income formula. Equal sign is the character that says, hey, I'm going to do a formula. And I'm going to take 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 cells above minus 1 cell above. Notice the blue one is 6 above. The green one is 1 above. Control Enter. I point to my fill handle when I see my angry rabbit. I click and drag. Now click on the last one and hit F2. Is the blue box still 6 above and the green one still 1 above? You betcha. Those are called relative cell references. It means from my point of view, me, the formula, where am I looking? Always 6 above, always minus 1 above. Now I want to come down here and I'm going to actually highlight all the dummy data. Those are just ones. I'm going to add a different color here just for the time being, maybe like a light blue or something, because that's really the main interest of this video. Is we're going to see how to do mixed cell references. Now, some more housekeeping. How about we highlight all these numbers and go to keyboard shortcut for format cells, Control 1. I'm going to go to the number tab. I'm going to say currency. I'm going to say none for $, for symbol, and click OK. Now we want to come down here, our cost of goods sold. We are going to assume that those are going to be 45.00, and I'm going to type the percent symbol. That percent symbol says, hey, this is not really the number 45, it's the number 0.45, and then with the percent formatted applied. That typing a percentage in is called formatting as you type. Control Enter. Now, just to prove it to yourself that 45 didn't go in the cell, and you can see up here too it says 45, but that's not really the number there. Control 1. Formatting, number formatting, is a facade. It sits on top of the cell. It's like a Halloween mask. If I go to General, which is the default, notice what happens here. Click OK. That is the number. Even though we typed in 45 and a percent symbol, that's the number that is underneath and will be used in our formulas when the formulas calculate. I'm going to use undo or Control Z. Operating expenses are going to be 10%, 0.00. I'm going to hit Enter. This one I'm going to do administrative expenses. It's 0.025. Control Enter. We did the opposite here. We typed the decimal in, and now I want to Control 1 and apply the percentage. That's a big mistake that people make, is they don't type in the decimal before they do percentages. Really, if you're going to type the number in, type the decimal and then apply percentage. Here, and then I'm going to click OK. Here we format it as we type. Here's the mistake that people make. They go 2.5. That's 2.5. That's 250%. If I Control 1 and apply percentage, that's 250%. Click OK. So we don't want that. That's just a very common mistake. Other expenses are going to be 5. Notice if it's pre-formatted, when I type a 5, the percentage symbol automatically pops up. Now I'm going to do the same trick here. I'm going to Control A to highlight the table. I'm going to go up to Home and say that one. I'm going to highlight this because I want to format this a little bit differently than up here to let people know this is different. This is where the formula inputs go. I'm going to go to the Home ribbon, maybe color red, and then font. By the way, right-click minimize. I have mine minimized so that we can see more things on the screen here. All right, now a little bit more housekeeping. Maybe I'm going to go like that. And I'm going to hold the Control key and click and drag. That allows me to highlight areas not next to each other. And then I'm going to Control B for bold. All right, now I want to highlight this area. And the keyboard shortcut for delete is the delete key. Right now, we learned about relative cell references, right? We learned about relative cell references. So when we copy this over, those little blue boxes and green boxes, in essence, moved, right? If I hit Tab, F2, you can see that they're moving. We do not want them to move now. We want to talk about not a relative cell reference, but an absolute cell reference. All right, here we go. The way you calculate cost of goods sold is you say equals relative cell reference 1 above times, and I need this 45%. Now, I know that these are relative cell references. So if I Control Enter and drag them over, if I go to the last one and hit F2, you could see the green box moved. It slid over because I slid the formula over 4 cells. So when you are copying a formula, you have to think carefully about your cell references. Right? So that green box really needed to be locked there. Now here's the long way to do it, right? Equals 1 cell above times B11. Tab equals 1 cell above times B11. equals one cell above times B11. Notice it's B11 each time. Well, that's annoying to have to type those in. So I'm going to say equals one cell above times, and now I'm going to click on this cell right here, and I'm going to put the secret code in. I'm going to hit the F4 key. As long as your cursor is touching the whichever cell reference you want to lock, you make sure the cursor is touching it, and then hit the F4 key. That locks it. Now, it puts $2 in, and that's arbitrary code. They just pick that. Hey, we're going to pick this. That means this cell reference is locked. When I Control-Enter and copy it over, I click in the last cell and hit F2. Oh, that's like magic. Look at that. The green box is locked. Now, let's think about this carefully. F2, there's $2. And why are there $2? Well, there's only two directions in Excel. When you're copying a formula, you're either copying it horizontally, which notice we're going across the column. So that $sign in front of the B means lock the B column. And there's a second $sign, which means the other direction. When you're copying it down like this, up and down, it says, hey, lock the 11. So when we go down, it's locked on this 11. Numbers are rows, letters are columns. Now, for our example here, we're only copying it one direction, all right? But nevertheless, there's two of them. Means it's locked wherever you copy it. I'm going to drag this over. Now I'm going to come here, and I'm going to type equals 2 cells above times this new B12. Now I know I need it locked this way, so I'm just going to hit the F4. Control-Enter. I'm going to copy it over. Click in the last cell, F2. Just works perfectly. Look at that. Now I'm going to click in this cell here, equals 3 cells above times. Now I'm going to click on this one. F4 to put my secret code in. Control-Enter. Copy it over. Click on the last cell, F2. Just amazing. Look at that. Locked. And finally, this one. 1, 2, 3, 4 above. I'm using the arrow key, by the way. Arrow, arrow, arrow is an alternative to equals your mouse times this B14, but I need to lock it. F4. Now I'm going to copy this over. Now let's take a look at our formula, right? B2, which is really not B2, it's 1 above, but this is B11. So when we copy it over here, Tab, F2, we could see blue one moved, the green one is locked. Absolutely beautiful. But now let's look at what happens, F2, when we go down. See that cell reference copying this way, it's a relative cell reference. But now let's, instead of hitting Tab, hit Enter, F2. No way. That B2 is being used in this whole column. Enter, F2. B2. So this whole column. All right. We're getting close. We've talked about relative cell references and absolute. Now we'll put that in the back of our mind, and that B2 worked that way when we went down the column. I want you to highlight these and delete them. Remember, our goal here is to learn about cell references, and we're going to get to the mixed cell reference. But I want to do it the same set of formulas a different way. There are always many ways to do things in Excel. Now notice, we did cost of goods sold and copied over. But now let's think about this. Equals, there's a different formula, a different way to do this. This formula, well, let's do it just sales for January times this one right here. Now, instead of making a formula that we copy this way, let's make a formula that we copy down. In this case, guess what? Operating expenses, administrative, other. All of them are using January revenue. So instead of, well, this time we're going to lock this one. I'm going to hit, notice, if your cursor's there, it'll, like we did the first formula, it locks the B11. But if your cursor's there, when you hit the F4 key, it puts the $2 signs, one for each direction, in the cell reference to lock the cell reference. Now when we copy down, B2 is locked, January revenue. And notice this one. This one is what? A relative cell reference. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 8 below. And guess what? That'll work fine, because when you move to operating, that green box will move down one. Control-Enter. And I'm going to drag it down. I'm going to click on the last one in F2. Sure enough, locked absolute cell reference with our $2 signs. This one is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 cells below. Totally amazing. Now let's do this one. Equals, now I'm going to arrow up and hit my F4 key to lock the C2 times, and this one. Notice, same situation here. When we copy down the February column, that green box needs to move as we copy down. Relative cell reference, absolute cell reference. Click on the last cell, F2. Look at that. Locked? Not locked. Let's try it again. Equals March, and this needs to be D2 when we're copying down the column. So hit the F4 key to lock it with the dollar signs times. And again, I still need that 45%. But this one, and by the way, this is a relative, this is absolute. But think about this. What is this relative? It's 1, 2 cells to my left, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 cells below. Control Enter, copy it down. Now I'm going to click here in F2, and I'm going to count. Because if it's a relative cell reference, it better be, from my point of view, me, the formula, it still better be relative position the same. 1, 2 cells to my left, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Totally amazing. Finally, we do it one more time. Equals April, but that E2 needs to be locked with the F4 key, times, this one's 1, 2, 3 cells to my left, 8 cells below. Control Enter. Copy it down in F2. Remember, if you're building your formulas, you better audit it and make sure it's right. Absolutely perfect. Now, let's see if we can recognize a pattern with the formulas we entered this time, relative and absolute. Now, I'm going to click up here and hit F2. All right, so this B2, enter. F2. The B2 is still B2, of course, because we locked it, and that one's still 8 below. Enter F2. Same thing. Now, let's look going this way, right? F2. B11. That one's right there. When we're going down, we absolutely want it 8 below, but I'm going to hit the Tab key and hit F2. What in the world is going on here? We used B11 again. Tab, F2. Locked here, but this one still is B11. So what is going on here? Let's take a look. F2. Notice when we copy this direction, Tab, F2, B11. That is B11 right there. If we could, and I'm going to hit Tab and F2, if we could lock this going to the side, right? Because when the formula goes horizontally across the letters, we want it locked on the 45%. But notice that very same cell reference, B11, when we copy it down across the rows, enter F2, it moved to 12. It's exactly what we want, still 8 below, but it moved to 12. Enter F2, move to 13. Enter F2, move to 14. So here is the incentive. We need, or here's the solution. We need to have this B11 locked when we go this way, Tab F2, but not when we F2, enter F2, not when we go down, right? So that is our goal here. The answer is we only want it locked one direction. When it moves down across the rows, we want it to move relatively 8 below. But when we move this direction, it's got to be Tab, F2, locked. So let's come to this formula right here. And actually, we'll just delete everything. Equals. OK, there's our base formula. We need this B11 to be locked when you go this way, as we just saw a moment ago, but not locked. Absolute cell reference across the column, relative cell reference when you move down across the rows. Well, just a moment ago, we said if you click your cursor in the middle of a cell reference and hit the F4 key, it puts in $2 signs. Now, the reason why is because there are two directions in Excel, across the columns and across the rows. Across the rows, across the columns. So if your goal is to lock it one way but not the other, you then only put $1 sign. Now, here's the trick. I'm just going to hit the F4 key. Right? You start, every time when you build your formula, you start with a relative cell reference. And you need to ask 2 questions of the cell reference. The first question is, and by the way, 2 questions, why? Because there's only 2 directions in Excel. When do we have to ask the question? Whenever we're copying a formula. So here's the question number 1. When I move it across the columns, copying across the columns, do I want it locked or do I want it a relative cell reference? I want it locked, as we just saw. So the way I remember it is if I'm moving the formula, copying it this way, not moving, copying it this way. If I want it locked, I just kind of drag my finger. Look at that. I'm copying across the letters, so that means the letter has to be locked. So I'm going to hit the F4 key once, then twice, then 3 times. That B has a $sign in front of it. That means when I move this direction, copying it across the columns, it's locked. Now, question number 2. When I copy this formula down, do I want it locked or absolute? Do I want this to move down one when I copy it down? I do. I actually want it to move relatively. So since I'm going across the numbers, I'm not going to put any $sign in front of that number. Now again, here is the 45%. When we move this way, it needs to be locked on that green box right there. But when we move down, copying it down, it needs to move to that 10%. So there it is. 1 cell reference, we ask both questions. Now you move on to the next one, and you ask 2 questions. Now, it doesn't matter which question you ask first. Let's ask up and down first. Now, when we're going down, copying, do we want it locked on January, or do we want it a relative cell reference? Well, of course, this column is for January, so it needs to be locked. So you hit the F4 key once. You say, well, there's 2 $signs. I only want the one that matters when I'm copying it down across the rows. Well, guess what? If it's copying and you're going across numbers, that means the $sign has to be in front of that number. So I'm going to hit the F4 key a second time and leave a $sign just in front of the number. Now, the next question is, we already asked up and down. Now, what do we want it to do when we move across the column? So copy, copy, copy. Well, look at this. I'm just going to move my finger just like I'm copying a formula. It's going across the letters, and I want it to move. I want it to go from January to February, February to March. So that blue one needs to move relatively. All right. Since I'm going across the letters, no $sign in front of that B. And that's it. Those are called mixed cell reference. This is a mixed cell reference with the column locked and the row not. This is a mixed cell reference with the row locked, the column not locked. Control Enter. I'm going to drag it down, and when you drag it down, you have to let go at the bottom and then point to your fill handle and click and drag and copy it over. Now, when you're doing rectangle or square of formulas like this, you go diagonally furthest to the furthest one away and hit the F2 key. If that formula in that's called range finder, or it's kind of like auditing your formula. If the blue box is in the correct place and the green box is in the correct place, you go, woohoo! That's amazing how much time we saved, right? We did it in 1/4 of the time. Got the formula exactly right. That is really the hardest thing to learn for most people. And when you start doing intermediate and advanced Excel, you realize that a lot of the cool tricks for conditional formatting, for formulas, for data validation, for all sorts of advanced tricks rely on the fact that you know how to do mixed cell references. All right. Hopefully that was helpful for people trying to learn mixed cell references. All right, we'll see you next trick.